On an ordinary morning in a small town, Jake Carter, a rugged single dad with calloused hands and a soft heart, pulls over to help a woman stranded by the roadside. Her sleek car screams wealth, her tailored suit spells power, but to Jake, she's just someone in need. What he doesn't know is that this brief act of kindness will flip his world upside down. The woman is Claire Dalton, a no-nonsense CEO of one of the fastest-growing media companies, his dream company. She's battling boardroom politics, image expectations, and the loneliness money can't fix. He's juggling late rent, daycare, pickups, and dreams he's tucked away for too long. What starts as a simple good deed turns into a life-changing twist of fate. Jake gets a second chance at the life he thought he'd lost, while Claire finds something her world of strategy and status never offered: genuine connection. As their paths intertwine, secrets unravel, sparks ignite, and both must decide: do they play it safe or risk everything for something real? From roadside rescue to corporate chaos, Chance Encounter is a heartwarming tale of fate, ambition, and love found in the most unexpected places. Stay with us. You won't want to miss what happens next. The alarm screamed at 5:45 a.m., cutting through the stillness of Jake Carter's modest two-bedroom home. He slapped it silent with the groggy precision of a man used to being up before the sun. In the next room, his 6-year-old daughter Lily mumbled in her sleep, tangled in superhero-themed blankets. The house smelled faintly of yesterday's coffee and cinnamon oatmeal, remnants of a routine held together by sheer grit. Jake moved through the motions: pack Lily's lunch, check her backpack, lay out her clothes, and slip a note inside her lunchbox like always. "You're stronger than you think, Peanut." Then came the thermos of burnt black coffee, steel-toed boots, and the mental shift from dad to worker. By 6:30, Lily was bundled into the passenger seat of his beat-up old truck, still blinking sleep from her eyes. Jake glanced over at her in the rearview mirror. She smiled, gap-toothed and pure, and he felt that familiar ache in his chest, the one that reminded him why he did all this in the first place. The drive was quiet, save for the low hum of morning radio and the occasional chirp of Lily singing to herself. He dropped her at Ms. Rosie's daycare with a kiss on the forehead and a promise: "I'll pick you up by 6. We'll get burgers." Back on the road, Jake headed toward the north end of town where a potential job interview at Visionary Media waited, his Hail Mary. He'd spent nights rewriting his resume, listing every freelance gig, every construction project, every camera job he'd taken since his dreams of working in storytelling were put on hold. Visionary Media was more than just a company. It was the company. Their documentaries told real stories about real people. Jake wanted in. He was halfway down Route 47 when he saw it. A sleek, silver BMW stopped awkwardly on the shoulder. Hazard lights blinked like distress signals. Jake slowed instinctively. Most cars would zoom past without a second thought, but Jake had never been that kind of man. Pulling over, he grabbed his toolkit from the back and approached the car. The tinted window lowered slowly, revealing a woman in her 30s, polished, poised, and clearly out of place on a dusty roadside. She looked up from her phone, frustration etched into her sharp features. "Battery's dead," she said flatly, not waiting for him to speak. "And I have no signal. You're the first car to stop in 20 minutes. Jake nodded, his blue-collar instincts kicking in. "Mind popping the hood? Let's take a look." She hesitated, then pulled the lever. As Jake examined the engine, he asked casually, "Headed somewhere important?" She laughed, humorless. "Important. Try to make or break board meetings in 20 minutes, so yeah, just a little." He smiled without looking up. "Aren't they always?" In 20 minutes, with a creative twist of jumper cables and a makeshift battery charge using parts from his toolbox, he had the car purring back to life. She stepped out, heels crunching against gravel, and offered a rare smile. "That was impressive," she admitted. "I owe you one." Jake wiped his hands on a rag. "Just glad I could help. I'm Jake, by the way." "Claire," she replied, reaching into her purse and handing him a sleek business card. He glanced at it, not recognizing the name or the company logo. "Thanks, Claire. I gotta run, or I'll miss my shot at a new job myself." "Let me guess," she teased. "You work miracles on cars for a living." He chuckled. "Nah, I'm a filmmaker, or I was. Today I'm just trying to get hired." Claire paused, then looked down at his card, one he'd scribbled his email on the back of in case she ever needed a favor again. She slipped it into her coat pocket, watching as he jogged back to his truck. "Good luck, Jake," she called. He gave her a thumbs up and a grin before pulling back onto the road, unaware that the woman he just helped was not only a CEO, but the very CEO of Visionary Media, and she was already thinking about how to see him again. Claire Dalton stared at the fading outline of Jake's truck disappearing down Route 47, her perfectly manicured hand still gripping the steering wheel. The smell of oil clung faintly to her coat, and a smear of grease marked her wrist. A souvenir from an encounter that rattled more than just her car. She slid into the driver's seat, her gaze falling on the business card Jake had given her. "Jake Carter," it read, followed by a Gmail address and the scribbled title, "Freelance Creative Storyteller." No LinkedIn link, no agency logo, just honesty, unfiltered. Claire started the engine, now humming smoothly, and sighed. She was late. By the time she rolled into the Visionary Media headquarters, an angular glass building towering over downtown, the boardroom lights were already on. She gave her assistant a brief nod, adjusted her hair, and walked in without apology. Seated around the conference table were 8 board members, most of whom preferred spreadsheets to storytelling. As Claire launched into her presentation, plans for an urban docu-series, hiring new creatives, diversifying narrative voices, she noticed the skeptical looks. "Why do we need fresh voices from outside the industry?" asked Andrew Foster, CFO, with a smirk. "We're already winning Emmys." "Because we've stopped being bold," Claire replied, steady. "We're safe. Safe isn't visionary." As murmurs rippled around the table, Claire found her mind drifting back to the man with the dirt under his nails and the passion in his eyes. Jake Carter wasn't polished, but he was real. And maybe, just maybe, exactly what this place needed. Jake's truck sputtered as he pulled into the parking lot of a low-rise building where the Visionary Media interviews were being held. The hands of the dashboard clock had already betrayed him. 15 minutes late. He sat for a moment gripping the wheel, his stomach tight with frustration. "You did the right thing," he reminded himself. Still, it was hard not to imagine the opportunity slipping through his fingers. He entered the lobby, breathless and apologetic, but the receptionist only offered a tight smile. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. The last interview slot ended 5 minutes ago." His shoulders sagged. "Is there any chance someone could still meet me?" even 5 minutes. I need this shot." She hesitated, then tapped a few keys. "Leave your resume. I'll note your arrival." Jake nodded, left the crisp envelope he'd rehearsed over for days, and exited with the slow walk of a man trying not to hope too much. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, burning away the cool morning. Jake leaned against his truck and looked up at the sky. He didn't regret helping Claire, not for a second. But as he turned the key in the ignition, part of him couldn't help but whisper, "Maybe nice guys really do finish last." Claire sat alone in her office that afternoon, flipping through the stack of candidate resumes on her desk. None of them moved her. They were technically proficient, sure, graduates of prestigious film schools, portfolios filled with cinematic sizzle reels, but there was no spark, no soul. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples until a knock at the door startled her. "Sorry," said her assistant, stepping in with a folder. "You wanted to see all submissions, even the late ones." Claire took it with a nod, thumbing through out of courtesy until she saw the name, Jake Carter. She froze. Opening the folder, she scanned his cover letter, surprisingly articulate, describing his love for storytelling born from documenting local heroes, community struggles, the invisible stories around him. His reel, linked via QR code, played rough but authentic mini-documentaries of single mothers, small-town athletes, veterans, and street artists. There were flaws, but also magic. Claire couldn't help the smile that tugged at her lips. She picked up her phone and buzzed her assistant. "Find me his contact information. I want to set up a special interview." "You already passed on the job opening," the assistant reminded her. "Then we'll make a new one." As she hung up, Claire looked out her window at the city below. This wasn't about gratitude. It was instinct. She'd spent years chasing talent that looked right on paper. Jake Carter felt right. The next morning, Jake sat at his kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling job boards on his phone. Lily munched cereal beside him, humming a tune from her favorite cartoon. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Daddy, are you sad?" Jake looked up, surprised. "What makes you say that, Peanut?" "You're making your thinking face. You always do that when you're trying to be brave." He chuckled and pulled her into a side hug. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff." Lily frowned, as if that were the worst answer in the world. Grown-up stuff should be fun sometimes. Jake laughed, but her words stayed with him. After dropping Lily off, Jake returned home to find his email inbox unusually full. One stood out. Subject: Visionary Media, Follow-Up Opportunity, from claire.dalton@visionarymedia.com. Jake stared at the name, his pulse quickening. He opened the email. "Mr. Carter, thank you for your application. Though you missed your interview slot, I'd like to schedule a one-on-one meeting at your earliest convenience. Please let me know your availability. Claire Dalton, CEO." He leaned back in his chair, stunned. Claire, the woman on the road. He hadn't recognized her name before, but now it was impossible not to connect the dots. What was she playing at? And yet, beneath his cautious curiosity, excitement stirred. Maybe fate hadn't passed him by after all. Claire watched the elevator numbers tick down toward the lobby. She tugged at her blazer cuffs, smoothing invisible creases, and checked her reflection in the polished wall. She hadn't told anyone Jake was coming in. Not her assistant, not the board. This meeting was off the record, just like their roadside encounter. Something told her Jake wouldn't appreciate a red carpet. He arrived 5 minutes early, still in work boots, still carrying that quiet mix of humility and pride. When the receptionist tried to redirect him to HR, Claire appeared beside them, her presence commanding as ever. "He's with me," she said. Jake blinked. "Well, okay then." They took the elevator up in silence. Claire broke it first. "Sorry about the email bomb. I figured I owed you a real meeting." Jake tilted his head. "Why me?" "Out of everyone." She shrugged, looking straight ahead. "Let's say I have an eye for stories that matter." He didn't press, but his wariness lingered. Inside her office, she gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Let's talk about dreams, Jake. What does your ideal job look like?" Jake considered. "Telling stories that change how people see the world, stories that give people hope, the kind you don't need special effects for, just truth." Claire folded her hands. "That's the job I want you to have here." He blinked, stunned. "No formal title, not yet, but I want to see what you do with a pilot project, your vision, your voice. I'll give you a budget, a small team, and full creative control." Jake leaned forward. "Why?" She smiled. "Because you pulled over for a stranger when it meant missing your shot. That tells me everything I need to know." The visionary media boardroom was abuzz 2 days later. Claire stood at the head of the table, calm but resolute, her fingers laced in front of her. "I've hired a new consultant," she began, skipping pleasantries. "He'll be developing a new series focused on underrepresented communities." Andrew Foster arched an eyebrow. "Is this candidate who missed his interview?" Claire didn't flinch. "He was late because he was helping someone on the road. Me, actually. His name is Jake Carter." Another board member, Linda Mays, frowned. "No formal training, no degrees, just a freelancer with a heart." Claire gave her a measured look. "Exactly." The room fell silent for a moment, then broke into whispers. "We can't just hand out projects based on feel-good stories," Andrew scoffed. "This isn't about charity," Claire said. "It's about instinct, about real talent that doesn't come through conventional channels." "He has 0 corporate experience," Linda pointed out. "And that's his strength. He's not shaped by bureaucracy. He listens to people. That's what our next series needs." Andrew leaned back, folding his arms. "If this backfires, it's on you." Claire nodded once. Noted. But as she exited the meeting, her jaw tight and spine straight, she already knew she'd made the right call. Jake Carter wasn't a risk. He was the story they'd forgotten how to tell. Claire stayed late at the office that evening, long after the boardroom had emptied and the lights dimmed floor by floor. The city outside glittered with ambition. Inside her office, however, she sat cross-legged on the couch, laptop in hand, Jake's resume on the screen once again. It was sparse by industry standards, no Ivy League name, no glossy studio logos. But it felt different. She watched the reel again, gritty, honest interviews filmed on front porches, in barber shops, at kitchen tables, stories of resilience and struggle, of people who'd been overlooked. She paused on one particular frame, an elderly man crying softly as he described his time in Vietnam, with Jake's voice gently prompting him off-screen. The moment was raw, real. Claire exhaled. She opened a blank document and began typing an internal memo. Project proposal, stories from the ground. A docu-series profiling voices outside the mainstream media spotlight. Lead creative, Jake Carter. She added a footnote just for herself. Sometimes the best storytellers aren't polished. They're simply brave enough to care. Claire hit save, leaned back, and let the city lights blur. For the first time in months, she wasn't worried about ratings or boardroom opinions. She was excited. Jake didn't expect to see Claire again so soon. Not in a muddy field just outside the east side of town. He was overseeing a community garden shoot, capturing footage for his pitch presentation. Kids ran past, laughing. An old woman handed him a cup of sweet tea. And then there she was. Heels traded for boots, trench coat replaced by a denim jacket, standing by the edge of the raised beds, hands in her pockets. "Claire?" She smiled. "I figured you'd be out here, not in some office." He wiped his hands and walked over, baffled but glad. "Didn't expect a CEO to show up to the field." "Didn't expect a field to feel like the future of our company," she replied. Jake blinked. "You're serious about this?" She nodded. "I've read the backlash from the board. They don't see it yet, but I do." Jake handed her his camera. "Take a look." Claire studied the footage. A single father teaching teens how to grow tomatoes. A girl talking about food insecurity and her dream of becoming a chef. Real, unscripted moments. This is it," she whispered. Jake chuckled. "Not bad for a guy with no degree." She handed the camera back. "You've got something better, purpose." When Jake entered the Visionary Media building the following Monday, the receptionist greeted him with a smile. This time, there was no confusion. His name badge was ready. A temporary ID hung from a lanyard around his neck, like a symbol of something bigger than luck, recognition. He rode the elevator up to the executive floor, adjusting his jacket. No tie, he didn't own one, but clean jeans, a pressed shirt, and confidence he didn't feel the week before. Claire met him at her office door. "Glad you came." He smiled. "Wasn't gonna miss this one." Inside, the tone shifted. Professional. Focused. Claire handed him a thick folder with the words Pilot Project, SFTG on the cover, short for Stories from the Ground. "This is your test run," she explained. "You'll get a small crew, a budget, 2 months. Show me what you can do." Jake opened the folder. Budget spreadsheets, shoot timelines, contact lists. His eyes widened. "This is real." "Very real," she said. "And if it works, we'll make it a full series." He paused, unsure. "What if I mess this up?" Claire leaned against her desk, arms folded. "Then we both go down swinging, but something tells me you won't." They stood there for a beat, the air charged with mutual trust. Then Jake grinned, held out his hand. "Let's be honest." Claire took it, firm and certain. "Let's make something unforgettable." Jake Carter stood in front of the Visionary Media building again, this time with a camera bag slung over one shoulder and a fresh script outline in his hand. It was technically his first official day, but unlike last time, there were no nerves. Not because he wasn't anxious, he was, but because something had shifted. He belonged here now. Inside, Claire waited with a small production team, 2 editors, a line producer, and an intern with neon-dyed hair and an obsession with vintage film. Claire introduced them one by one, watching Jake carefully as he greeted each with genuine warmth. "This isn't going to be flashy," Jake said as they gathered around a long table. "We're not going to stage anything. No filters, no voiceover scripts. Just conversations with people who've been told their stories aren't valuable." The intern nodded. "You want to show the world as it is." "Exactly." Claire, standing by the window, smiled. This wasn't the typical corporate production pitch, but she could already see the story forming. Later, as the team broke into logistics, she pulled Jake aside. "You speak like you're already leading this place." Jake shrugged. "I'm not trying to lead." She looked at him. "That's probably why you will." The following week, Claire stood once again in the Visionary Media boardroom, a folder labeled SFTG:phase 1 in her hand. Jake wasn't with her. This part was her fight. Andrew Foster leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You're doubling the budget for a field docu-series with zero market data." "It's not zero," Claire said coolly. "Distributing early analytics and viewer feedback from internal screenings. Test audiences responded strongly, especially underserved communities." Linda Mays raised an eyebrow. "This Jake Carter, he doesn't come from our world." Claire met her gaze. "That's the point." "Don't confuse grit with genius," Andrew warned. Claire took a breath. "And don't confuse credentials with vision. We've been recycling the same voices for years. Jake speaks to the people we've ignored." The room buzzed with tension. Claire continued, undeterred. "Give me 2 more weeks. Let the pilot launch internally. If the numbers don't justify the spend, I'll shut it down." Andrew sighed. "Fine. But if this project tanks, the fallout's yours." Claire nodded once, then turned to leave. As she walked back to her office, the weight of their doubt pressed on her, but underneath it was something stronger. Conviction. Jake Carter had a voice, and she was going to make sure the world heard it. Jake sat across from Claire later that afternoon, unaware of the heat she'd just taken in the boardroom on his behalf. His mind was already racing through equipment needs, the interview locations, and backup batteries. Claire slid a contract across the desk. "This makes it official. Creative consultant, short-term, project-based." Jake glanced at the papers, then back at her. "I don't need a title." She smiled faintly. "You do if I want to pay you properly." He hesitated, still gripping the edge of the desk. "You sure about this?" "About me?" Claire leaned forward. "Jake, you helped me when I was just some woman stranded on the road. You had no idea who I was, no motive. You saw me." "That's what I do. I see people." She nodded. "Exactly. That's why I'm sure." Jake signed without another word. Claire stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to Visionary Media." He shook it firmly, but with a flicker of a smile. "So what happens now?" Claire grinned. "Now you show me your world." As he left her office with the signed contract in hand, Claire sat back, thinking about how strange life could be. A dead car battery, a detour on Route 47, and a storyteller who just might change everything. Jake's first official day on the job wasn't exactly glamorous. Visionary Media's creative wing was housed in a loft-style annex with high ceilings, exposed beams, and an eclectic mix of whiteboards, beanbags, and egos. The kind of place where 20-somethings wore headphones bigger than their heads and debated the difference between raw and authentic footage over cold brew. Jake stuck out like a worn denim jacket in a sea of silk scarves and ironic vintage tees. "Hey, you lost something?" one editor asked, half joking, when Jake wandered into the editing bay, carrying a box of old camera lenses and field notes. "Nope," Jake said, setting the box down. "I'm your new creative consultant, here to teach you how to get real stories without filters or ego." The room fell into awkward silence until the intern, Ellie, gave him a thumbs up. "I'm in. What's the plan?" Jake smiled. "Simple. We hit the streets. I'll show you how to shoot life as it is." He handed out assignments, talked to local artists, small business owners, neighborhood leaders, and requested 0 prep questions. Let the story come to you. Don't script it. Don't control it. By noon, some of the team still looked skeptical. Jake noticed the stares, the whispered doubts. He wasn't insulted. He'd worked on construction sites tougher than this. What stung more was their hesitation to believe in the method, not in him. At lunch, he took his sandwich out to the rooftop, where the city sprawled below in all its chaos and noise. Claire joined him minutes later, carrying 2 coffees. "How's it going?" she asked. Jake took the cup with a grateful nod. "Depends. Do you want the corporate answer or the honest one?" Claire smiled. "Always honest." Jake sighed. "They don't get me yet. I'm not what they expected. I know that." "They'll come around," she said. "And if they don't?" Claire turned to face him fully. "Then you show them something so undeniably human, they can't look away." Jake looked out at the skyline. "I've got one story in mind already. I just need time." "You've got it," she said. They sat together in silence, 2 people from different worlds, united by the same belief. Stories still mattered. A week into the pilot project, Claire invited Jake to lunch. Not in the cafeteria or some PR-friendly bistro, but a quiet, hole-in-the-wall diner just off 8th Street. The kind of place with sticky menus, overworked servers, and meatloaf that could make you cry if you grew up in the right kind of home. Jake raised an eyebrow when they walked in. "Didn't peg you for the greasy spoon type." Claire grinned. "I like to keep people guessing." They sat at a corner booth. She ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup. He got the fried chicken and sweet tea. "You've been quiet lately," she said, stirring her spoon. "Work trouble?" "Just thinking," Jake replied. "I've got 3 interviews that could anchor the first episode. One of them's a kid who runs an after-school poetry club out of his mom's garage. He's 17. Says he started it to keep his friends off the street." Claire's eyes lit up. "That's gold." Jake nodded. "I think so, but the team, they're still chasing polish. They want perfect lighting, clean cuts. I keep telling them, that's not what this is." Claire sipped her soup. "You're right, it's not, but give them space. They've been trained to see stories through a certain lens. You're showing them how to see without one." Jake looked at her carefully. "Why are you backing this so hard? Me, this project. I mean, you barely know me." Claire didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, her expression softening. "Because you remind me of why I started this company," she said. "Before the board meetings and market research, before the suits, I just wanted to tell stories that made people feel something. You still believe in that, and I guess I needed to be reminded." Jake sat back, folding his arms. That's a pretty honest answer. She met his eyes. I figured you'd appreciate that. The wind had picked up by the time they left the diner, Claire wrapping her coat tighter around her as Jake walked her to her car. They stopped beside the sleek BMW, the same one Jake had fixed on Route 47. It looked out of place against the cracked pavement and chipped curb paint. Claire leaned against the hood, hesitating for a moment. I never told you something, she said, about that day you helped me. Jake tilted his head. You mean besides the fact that you're the CEO of the place I was trying to get hired at? She laughed softly. Yeah, besides that. She turned to face him. I almost didn't stop that day. I was late for the same meeting I ended up canceling after I met you. But when you fixed my car, you didn't ask for anything. No business card, no pitch, nothing. You just helped. Jake shrugged. It's how I was raised. Claire's eyes searched his. Well, it meant something, more than you know. You reminded me that there's power in showing up for people without expecting anything back. That's why I fought for you, and why I'll keep fighting. Jake looked down at the pavement, then back up at her. Thank you for not forgetting. There was a moment between them, unspoken but felt, and just like that, the distance between CEO and consultant didn't feel so wide anymore. The following morning, Jake walked into Visionary Media's office with the same camera bag slung over his shoulder, but something had changed. Eyes lingered longer than usual. Conversations hushed as he passed. He wasn't paranoid. He'd worked around too many crews to miss the signs. By noon, the whispers had turned into passive-aggressive jokes. So Claire Dalton's protege gets his own project now. Jake overheard it near the coffee machine. Another voice chimed in. Bet I'd get greenlit too if I fixed her car. He kept walking, jaw tight. In the editing bay, even Ellie, usually a source of support, seemed distant. People are saying you and Claire knew each other before you got hired. Jake sighed. I helped her with her car. Yeah, didn't even know who she was. Ellie looked torn. I believe you, but this place, people like to talk. You're not just the new guy anymore. You're the guy who's in. He didn't answer. Instead, he sat down, opened the footage of the teen poet's interview, and started editing. His hands moved with practiced rhythm, but his mind was elsewhere. That afternoon, he found Claire in her office, reviewing a proposal. We need to talk, he said. She looked up, already guessing why. I know, she said softly. The office is buzzing. I don't want to be seen as a shortcut, Jake said. Or worse, a favor. You're not, she said firmly. But you're also not invisible anymore. That makes you a target. I didn't come here to be part of some narrative I can't control. You came here to tell the stories no one else could, she reminded him. So tell them, let the work speak. Jake nodded, but deep down he knew reputation didn't always wait for results. 2 weeks later, Claire gathered a hand-picked group of executives and investors in Visionary Media's private screening room. Jake stood near the back, arms crossed, heart racing. On the screen in front of them was the pilot episode of Stories from the Ground. It opened with a boy in a garage. A single handheld shot. No music, no title sequence. Just the hum of a cheap box fan and the sound of a teenage voice reading poetry about abandonment, hope, and survival. Cut to a montage of his friends, kids laughing on cracked sidewalks, rapping on street corners, making art from cardboard and spray paint. Raw footage, honest framing, no gloss. By the time the 20-minute segment ended, the room was silent. Claire stood. What you just saw is the heartbeat of this company and the future of how we reach real people. Andrew Foster tapped his pen, unimpressed. It's underproduced, emotionally indulgent. Another executive leaned forward. It's brilliant, gritty, grounded, and extremely current. Linda Mays nodded slowly. It's not for our usual demographic, but it might be for the one we're always chasing. Andrew shrugged. One episode isn't proof. Claire turned to Jake. Tell them what's next. Jake stepped forward, nervous but resolute. This series isn't about sympathy. It's about dignity. These aren't sob stories. They're people who refuse to give up. We've already got 3 more subjects lined up. Each one as compelling as this first. Silence followed. Then Claire added, We're not chasing awards with this. We're chasing truth. Eventually, one of the marketing leads nodded. Let's do a limited release online. Gauge audience response. Jake and Claire exchanged a glance. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a start. After the pitch, Jake needed air. He picked up Lily from school and took her for ice cream, a tradition they both cherished. She licked her cone and kicked her feet, seated on the bench beside him. Did you have a good day, Daddy? I did, Jake said, smiling. I think something big is finally happening at work. Is that the place with the fancy coffee machine and the spinny chairs? Jake laughed. That's the one. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Do they know how awesome you are? Not yet, he whispered, but they're starting to. That weekend, Claire showed up at Lily's soccer game. No PR cameras, no polished wardrobe, just jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie. Jake saw her from across the field and waved, surprised. Lily ran up to her. You came. Wouldn't miss it, Claire said, smiling. Jake joined them, eyebrows raised. Didn't peg you for the weekend type, Claire smirked. You said this is where the real stories happen, right? They sat together in folding chairs, cheering for Lily's team. Claire brought snacks. Jake brought the stories. Somewhere between juice boxes and goal kicks, the line between their worlds began to blur. Later, as Lily dozed in the back seat, Jake glanced at Claire beside him. You fit into this part of my life more easily than I expected. Claire smiled. That's the part I wasn't expecting either. It started as a casual after-work rhythm. Claire would swing by a location shoot or invite Jake to walk through upcoming schedules. At first, it was business project reviews, resource talks, creative syncs. But by the end of the 3rd week, their meetings started, including late-night coffee, takeout containers spread across Claire's desk, and the occasional shared laugh that lingered longer than it should. Jake noticed how Claire would loosen her ponytail near 9 p.m., let her shoulders drop, and laugh like someone who'd forgotten how to. Claire, in turn, noticed how Jake spoke about people with reverence, like each life held an unwritten poem worth reading out loud. One night, after a particularly emotional interview shoot, Claire stopped by Jake's place with Chinese food. This isn't a date, she clarified quickly. Jake grinned. Didn't think it was. You brought tofu. They ate on the floor, Jake's modest living room scattered with Lily's toys and school papers. Claire didn't seem to mind. In fact, she asked about Lily more than once. "She's everything," Jake said. "Keeps me grounded. Reminds me of who I want to be." Claire smiled. "I envy that." "You? What could you possibly envy?" She didn't answer, just reached for another dumpling and changed the subject. Later, after Lily was asleep, they sat on the porch, the summer breeze brushing past them in waves. Jake leaned against the railing. "Do you ever think maybe none of this was a coincidence?" Claire tilted her head. "You mean the car, the job, all of it?" "Yeah, like something was making sure we crossed paths." Claire looked at him, really looked, and said, "Maybe we were each other's detour and the real destination." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But something between them changed that night, and neither of them wanted to change it back. It had been 5 years since Claire last saw him. Julian Marks, her ex-fiancé and once partner in building Visionary Media's early funding. He left when she refused to compromise the company's editorial independence for a corporate buyout. Now he was back. The email arrived without warning. "Let's talk. Visionary Media has potential again, and you have an image problem. I can help fix both." Claire stared at her screen, heart thudding. Julian never did anything without motive, and he wasn't one to give compliments without cashing in on them. She didn't reply. Instead, she buried herself in work, approving Jake's next subjects, planning a mini-campaign for the pilot's digital release, and managing the optics around his growing presence in the company. But whispers had begun. Board members knew Julian had resurfaced. A few thought his return might stabilize Claire's risk-taking. Some even saw him as a welcome balance to Jake's rising influence. That night, Claire sat alone in her office, blinds drawn, the city sparkling just beyond the glass. She picked up her phone and, almost without thinking, texted Jake, "You free to talk?" His reply came seconds later. "Always." 20 minutes later, they sat in his truck parked outside her building. She didn't hold back. Told him about Julian, their history, his ambitions, and what it might mean. Jake listened carefully, then said, "So what's the real fear here? That he's going to take your company? Or that he's going to take you back to who you were before?" Claire stared at him. "You've built something honest," he said. "Don't let someone from your past sell you a version of yourself you've outgrown." She didn't say thank you. She just looked at him like she was seeing him again, for the first time. It was an early morning meeting, 8 a.m. sharp. Claire walked into the boardroom ready to defend stories from the ground, armed with positive test results and a 300% spike in social engagement. But the air in the room felt different, colder. Andrew Foster stood, holding a manila folder. "Before we begin, there's something the board should review." He slid the folder across the table toward Claire. She opened it. Inside were printed screenshots, photos of her and Jake at the soccer game. Another of them laughed over takeout. One from the porch. Nothing inappropriate, but enough to spark assumptions. The room was filled with uneasy shifting. Andrew folded his arms. "Claire, you've shown a lack of transparency regarding your relationship with Mr. Carter. That creates a potential conflict of interest, especially given the resources his project is receiving." Claire kept her expression calm. "Jake and I are not in a personal relationship." "Yet," Andrew said. but perception matters, especially with media partners watching. Linda Mays nodded reluctantly. The optics are complicated. Claire closed the folder. This is a creative company. Since when did we start policing friendships? Andrew smiled thinly. When personal bias impacts corporate direction. Claire stood. Jake was hired based on merit. He earned every inch of this opportunity. If the board wants to question my judgment, so be it, but don't insult his work to justify your fear of change. A pause. Then Andrew said, "We're calling for a temporary review of the SFTG project. All spending and creative development are to be paused until further notice." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You're shutting it down?" "No," he said. "We're putting it on hold, effective immediately." Claire felt her pulse in her ears. They were trying to silence a voice she had finally helped amplify. And this time, it wasn't just about a company. It was personal. The conference room echoed with silence after the board adjourned. Claire stood alone, staring at the closed folder still resting on the table like a wound left open. Outside the glass walls, visionary media buzzed forward, assistants typing, editors in headphones, cameras being prepped, but inside, time felt suspended. She walked back to her office without a word. Jake arrived half an hour later, his shoulders carrying the same tired defiance he wore on hard days. He already knew something was wrong. The energy in the building had shifted. Doors closed when he approached. Conversation stalled mid-sentence. When he stepped into Claire's office, she was at the window, back to him, arms crossed. "I heard," he said quietly. Claire turned. Her expression was calm, but her eyes told another story. "They froze the project," she said, citing conflict of interest, perception risk. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Because we've had lunch. Because you showed up at my daughter's soccer game." Claire shook her head. "Because we made something that scared them. Not slick. Not curated, just honest." Jake dropped into the chair across from her. "I'll resign." Claire blinked. "What?" "I'll step down," he said. "Make a public statement. Say I was treated fairly and the project was paused for strategic reasons. It'll take the pressure off you." "No," she said firmly. "I won't let you take the fall for their fear." "I'm not taking a fall," he said. "I'm protecting the one person who believed in me when no one else would." Claire walked over, kneeling beside his chair. "If you leave, it'll look like guilt, like we were hiding something." Jake looked at her gently. "Then let's not hide. Let's be clear, honest, and unshakably proud of what we made." Claire smiled weakly. "You always make it sound so simple." Jake shrugged. "The truth usually is." It began with a blog post. A niche entertainment site published an exclusive tip about the CEO of Visionary Media developing a personal and professional entanglement with a newcomer filmmaker who'd bypassed standard hiring protocols. The article was speculative, but juicy enough to gain traction. Within 48 hours, the story had spread. Major outlets picked it up. Social media fed on it. Hashtags started trending. Visionary bias, CEO conflict, and more venomous ones Claire didn't dare repeat aloud. Claire sat in her office with a PR rep, a legal advisor, and a copy of the latest industry headline, "When Passion Projects Get Too Personal, a CEO's Gamble at Visionary Media." Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from reporters, board members, even old acquaintances trying to check in while subtly asking for inside details. Jake, meanwhile, had gone quiet. He was home with Lily, shielding her from the noise, trying to keep her routine normal. But when she asked, "Why are you on Mommy's phone at school?" while pointing to a headline, he knew things had spiraled beyond their control. He called Claire that night. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "You don't have anything to apologize for." "I didn't think it would get this ugly." "They're not after you," Claire said. "They're coming for me and what I represent." Jake paused. What happens next? There was silence. Then, "They're voting on an internal inquiry tomorrow," she said. "If the board rules against me, I could be removed." Jake's voice tightened. "You want me to speak publicly?" Claire hesitated. "Only if it's your choice." Jake exhaled. "Then I'll speak." The morning after the vote, the office felt like a courthouse. Everyone was watching Claire, but no one dared approach her. She walked past rows of desks with the steady calm of a soldier heading to the front lines. In the boardroom, Andrew Foster delivered the results with the bureaucratic smugness of a man who'd never taken a risk in his life. "The board has voted to place you on administrative leave pending further review of company ethics policy and executive behavior." Claire nodded once. Noted. She gathered her things, turned on her heel, and walked out. Jake was waiting for her in the parking lot. "I'm so sorry," he said. Claire didn't cry, didn't snap, just stood there with the California sunlight on her face and whispered, "They're afraid of what they don't control." Jake looked down. "Maybe I should have stayed invisible." "No," she said quickly. "You stayed human. That's what made you dangerous to them." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the city life moving around them. "Maybe this is a break," Jake said quietly. Claire gave him a sad smile. "Or maybe it's the start of something better." He looked at her, eyes full of regret and resolve. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me." "I didn't lose," Claire replied. "I chose." Jake looked toward the skyline, fists clenched loosely at his sides. "Then maybe it's time I chose too." Claire tilted her head. "Choose what?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "To fight." It was Sunday afternoon, and the backyard smelled of grass and charcoal. Jake stood at the grill, flipping burgers while Lily played with sidewalk chalk nearby, drawing smiley suns and stars with crooked arms. He was quieter than usual, his thoughts heavy despite the sizzle and hum of a peaceful day. "Are you mad?" Lily asked suddenly without looking up. Jake blinked. "Mad?" "Yeah. You look like when people say you can't have what you want, like when the toy store ran out of the red truck." Jake laughed, kneeling beside her. "Nah, I'm not mad, just thinking." "About work stuff?" Jake nodded. "About grown-up stuff." Lily squinted at her chalk. "Is it about Miss Claire?" Jake's heart stuttered. "Why, what makes you say that?" "You talk about her differently," Lily said simply. "Like how Mommy used to talk about Grandma's garden. Like something you miss before it's even gone." Jake looked at his daughter. This little person with so much intuition it almost scared him. "She got into trouble because of me." "Did she say that?" "No." "Then maybe she just likes you more than she likes being boss." Jake chuckled softly, but the truth in Lily's words sank deep. She didn't need to know the politics or the headlines. All she saw was that someone stood by him, and that meant something. Later, as they ate dinner on the porch, Lily handed him a drawing, a car, a road, and two stick figures holding hands. "This is you and Miss Claire, when her car was broken and you fixed it." Jake looked at the crayon drawing, a lump in his throat. "You made her smile when her car didn't," Lily said proudly. That night, after Lily was asleep, Jake sat at his desk, turned on his laptop, and started writing. Not a resignation, not an apology, a speech. The internal town hall meeting had been Claire's idea, back when things were going right. An open platform for storytelling, transparency, and company growth. Ironically, it was now the perfect place for the very voice the board had tried to suppress. Jake stood on the small auditorium stage with nothing but a mic and a heart full of everything he'd been holding back. Employees filled the rows, curious, cautious, some openly critical. A few cameras streamed the speech to other branches. He didn't clear his throat or pace the floor. He just stood still and began. "I'm not from here," he said. "Not just this company, I mean this world. The suits, the marketing, the polished answers. I'm from a world of hard work and harder mornings. A world where the best stories aren't written, they're lived." He paused. "When Claire gave me a shot, it wasn't charity. It was a chance. She saw something in me most people overlook: honesty, the ability to listen, and the courage to care." The room shifted, phones lowered, eyes lifted. "I never asked to be the face of anything, but I did ask to tell stories that matter. Stories from the ground. Wasn't about me. It was about all the people we forget. The ones who don't get to pitch, but who live the real dramas every day." He looked directly at the executives watching from the back. "You froze a project not because it failed, but because it didn't fit the mold. But maybe the mold's the problem." A murmur rippled through the room. "If standing next to Claire makes me a target, I'll take it, because I've seen what she stands for, and I believe this company was built for something braver than safety." He stepped back from the mic. "That's all I've got." Silence, then slow applause. First Ellie, then the intern, then the entire front row, and soon the room. The board didn't clap, but the company did, and that was enough. The next morning, Claire walked through the front doors of Visionary Media with a quiet sense of resolution. She had received a dozen messages overnight from employees thanking her. One simply said, "You gave us a voice. We heard it." She wasn't reinstated yet. The board hadn't changed their official decision, but something had shifted. The tide. Jake waited for her in the executive suite lounge with 2 coffees in hand. "Do you always bring peace offerings?" she asked. "I bring the truth," he said, "with extra cream." She smiled, accepting the cup. "Your speech went viral." "I noticed." "It's sparking something," Claire continued. "You reminded people why they joined this place in the first place. Not for stock options, for stories." A knock interrupted them. Linda Mays stepped in, holding a manila envelope. She looked less defensive than before, more reflective. "The board is reconvening," she said, "to revisit the pause on stories from the ground." Claire nodded. "And?" Linda hesitated. "I can't speak for everyone, but the staff responded, 'It's compelling. They see what you're fighting for. Some of us are starting to see it too." She left without another word. Jake looked at Claire. That sounded like progress. Claire exhaled. That sounded like redemption. That afternoon, the board held a closed vote, and by a narrow but definitive margin, Stories from the Ground was reinstated, not as a side project, as Visionary Media's new flagship series. The news hit internal emails, employee channels, and media outlets within hours. Claire's leave was rescinded. Jake's title upgraded to Creative Director of Documentary Initiatives. As Jake read the announcement aloud to Lily that evening, she beamed. "Does that mean you're the boss now?" Jake smiled. "It means I get to tell more stories with people who believe in them. And maybe, just maybe, with the woman who believed in him first." The auditorium at Visionary Media buzzed with nervous excitement. Staff members filled every seat. Industry guests, community leaders, and even a few skeptical board members milled about with branded popcorn bags and wine glasses. On the stage, a giant screen bore the logo of the new flagship series, Stories from the Ground. Jake stood backstage, heart hammering like it had the first time he held Lily as a baby. It wasn't stage fright, it was the weight of expectation, not just his own, but every story they had captured, every voice that had trusted him, every team member who'd followed him despite doubts. Claire appeared beside him, dressed in simple black with no flashy makeup or jewelry. She didn't need it. She radiated presence, calm, grounded, and quietly proud. "You ready?" she asked. "Not even a little," Jake said, half laughing. She reached out and squeezed his hand. "That's how you know it matters." The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. The room fell silent. The first episode opened with raw, ambient street sound. Footsteps, traffic, a bicycle bell. Then a teenage voice, poetic and clear. "They said we were just noise, but we are symphonies made of survival." The crowd leaned forward, drawn in. No narration, no graphics, just faces, real people. An old jazz musician recounting the death of live music venues. A mother describing her life with 3 jobs and a son who writes spoken words to keep sane. A corner store owner who gives out free snacks to hungry kids when no one's watching. 24 minutes later, the lights came back on to thunderous applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a standing ovation. People wiped their eyes. Even Linda Mays stood up slowly and clapped with both hands, expression unreadable but respectful. Jake turned to Claire, stunned. That really just happened." She nodded. They felt it. Press interviews followed. Photos, smiles, handshakes. But later, when the building quieted, Jake returned to the editing bay and watched the final scene again. A slow shot of a cracked sidewalk overlaid with the boy's voice. "You can't fix a world you don't see, so here we are, asking you to look." Jake knew this was just the beginning, but what a beginning it was. The days that followed were surreal. The series trended across platforms. Viewers poured in, not just from media circles, but from high schools, small towns, and community centers. Emails flooded in from people whose stories had never been told before. For the first time, Jake saw his name in trade blogs, not as a question mark, but as a headline. The authentic voice Visionary Media needed. Claire, meanwhile, found herself breathing easier. The board stepped back. The investors leaned in. For the first time in months, she slept full nights, dreaming in color again. But there was one more call she had to make. Her father answered on the second ring. "Claire?" "It's me," she said. A long pause. "I saw the launch," he finally said. "It was powerful. Thanks." Another pause. Longer this time. "I didn't think this kind of work was sustainable," he admitted. "Thought you were chasing ideals, but you're doing more than just telling stories. You're changing things." Claire's throat tightened. "That's what I always wanted you to see." "I do now," he said, "and I'm proud of you, Claire. Really proud." She didn't cry, not then, but after she hung up, she sat in the quiet of her apartment, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Later that week, she found herself on the porch of Jake's house. Lily was inside coloring. Jake brought her tea. "You okay?" he asked. "I think I finally am." They didn't talk about work that night, just music, memories, dreams. She told him about her mother's old record player. He told her about the treehouse he never finished building. They laughed. They leaned closer, and when their hands met, there was no fear, no doubt, just warmth. Spring settled over the city like a promise. Buds on trees, softer light, warmer mornings. Visionary media was thriving, not just in ratings, but in spirit. Departments collaborate more. Employees spoke up. New initiatives launched, inspired by stories from the ground. Jake had officially moved into a corner office, not that he used it much. He preferred being out with the crew, scouting locations, rolling cameras, shaking hands. His new title, creative director, looked fancy on paper, but he wore it like everything else, humbly. Claire, too, changed. Her speeches grew warmer. She started mentoring younger staff, telling them not just what to aim for, but why. Her leadership was no longer just respected, it was trusted. One afternoon, she and Jake stood on the roof of the building, watching the sun dip over the skyline. "I've been thinking," Jake said, sliding a small folder from his bag, "about something more permanent than a docu-series." Claire looked curious. She opened the folder. Inside was a proposal, handwritten, messy, but heartfelt. The Lighthouse Foundation, a non-profit arm of Visionary Media to support single parents in creative industries, with grants, mentorship, and job pipelines. Claire looked up, touched. "You want to build this?" "With you," he said. "You believed in me. I want to build something that pays that forward." She kissed him, soft and certain. The skyline melted behind them. In the distance, the hum of life carried on, but on that rooftop, something new began. Not a project, not a pitch, a partnership. One built not from strategy, but from sincerity. It was a Friday evening in late spring when Jake decided it was time. He had replayed the moment in his mind a dozen different ways, under a streetlight, during a press event, in the middle of a story shoot. But none of those felt right. Claire wasn't the kind of woman who needed spectacle. She needed truth, honesty, intention. So he chose the place where it all started. Route 47. It was early evening when he picked up Claire from her apartment. She looked stunning in a casual olive green sweater and jeans, hair loose around her shoulders, no trace of corporate armor. When she saw the direction they were driving, a slow smile curled at the corners of her lips. "You're taking me back to the scene of the crime?" she teased. Jake laughed. "Thought we'd give the place a happier ending." They arrived just as the sun dipped low over the hills, casting golden light across the asphalt. The same stretch of road where, months earlier, A broken car had rewritten both their lives. Claire stepped out and stood by the shoulder, arms folded as she gazed into the distance. I remember thinking that day, this is it. My whole career is about to unravel. Jake joined her, hands in his pockets. I remember thinking, guess I blew my only shot at getting hired. They both laughed. But you stopped anyway, she said more softly now. Even though it cost you. Jake turned to her. That moment didn't cost me anything. It gave me everything. Claire met his gaze, and in that quiet beat of wind and light, Jake reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, simple box. Claire blinked, her breath catching. Jake knelt, not on both knees like some grand performance, just one, and opened the box to reveal a silver band with a single engraved word on the inside. Truth. No marketing, he said. No proposal photos. Just me asking you one thing. Claire's eyes shimmered, but she didn't speak yet. I've spent my whole life chasing stories, Jake continued, trying to find meaning, depth, something real in a world full of noise. And then one day I pulled over on the side of the road and found the one person who changed everything I thought I knew. He looked up at her, steady and certain. Claire Dalton, I love you, I admire you, and I want to build a life that's not about chance meetings anymore, but choices. Ours. Will you marry me? Claire stood frozen for a second, silent, breath caught in her chest. Like a balloon she was afraid to release. Then she dropped to her knees too, right there beside him on the roadside, and threw her arms around his neck. Yes, she whispered against his shoulder. Yes, yes, yes. They stayed like that, tangled in each other, while traffic in the distance hummed like background music. Finally, Claire pulled back enough to laugh through her happy tears. God, we must look ridiculous. Jake smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Nope. We look like people who just got everything they didn't even know they needed. She looked at the ring, then back at him. Truth, huh? Truth, he said. The whole way through. They sat on the tailgate of his truck, passing a thermos of lukewarm coffee between them, watching the last rays of sunlight sink behind the trees. No camera crew, no press, no curated moment. Just two people, bruised by life but better for it, deciding to keep walking the same road together. Later, as they drove back toward the city, Claire rested her head on his shoulder. You realize this makes Lily my future stepdaughter, she murmured. Jake grinned. She already calls you Miss Claire with the best snacks. You're halfway there. Claire chuckled, then turned serious. Do you think we'll be enough? You, me, the foundation, the stories. Jake didn't hesitate. We don't have to be everything. We just have to be real. The rest will follow. Claire reached for his hand. It was rough and calloused, scarred from years of labor, but it held hers with a gentleness that no boardroom ever taught her, no textbook ever captured. A new chapter had begun, not just for them, but for the lives they touched through their work. The road ahead would still twist, still test them, but now they weren't walking it alone. 6 months later, the roadside where their lives first collided looked almost the same stretch of faded asphalt, the same crooked mile marker half hidden by tall grass. But something about it felt different now, brighter, like the universe itself remembered. Claire stood by the truck, holding a picnic basket, while Jake spread out a blanket under the same old oak tree nearby. Lily ran ahead, skipping stones across the shallow creek just beyond the ditch, her laughter ringing like wind chimes in the spring air. The three of them had come back, not because they had to, but because they wanted to mark the moment, to honor the road that had led them here, both literally and metaphorically. Jake sat down, leaning back on his elbows, watching Claire arrange sandwiches and snacks with that same organized elegance she brought to every project. "You know," he said with a grin, "for someone who used to live in power suits and boardrooms, you've gotten way too good at cutting crusts off PB&Js. Claire smirked. "It's called evolution, Mr. Creative Director. You should try it sometime." He reached out and tugged her closer. "Already did. That's how I ended up engaged to the most remarkable woman I've ever met." She kissed him softly, just as Lily called out from the creek, "Dad, Miss Claire, look, I found a frog." Jake smiled. "Be right there, Peanut." Claire watched him jog over to their daughter-to-be, and for a moment she let the scene wash over her, the sunlight, the breeze, the joy. She used to chase control, perfection, and prestige. Now she cherished pauses, imperfections, and the kind of love that never asked her to be anything more than herself. Later, as the sun began to dip, they sat on the blanket, plates empty, Lily curled up in Claire's lap, already dozing off. Jake glanced toward the road. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped that day?" Claire shook her head. "I don't have to, because whatever that life was, it wouldn't have been this." He nodded thoughtfully. "Crazy, isn't it? A flat tire and a delayed interview changed everything." "Fate," she said softly. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it's just proof that when you lead with kindness, the world finds a way to reward you." Claire glanced down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms, then back at Jake. "You know," she said, "this would make a pretty good story." Jake chuckled. "You think people would buy it?" "I'd greenlight it," she said. They laughed quietly, the kind of laughter born not from humor but from healing. As twilight settled, Jake pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. Claire raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" "Writing our next pitch," he said. "A docu-series, working title, Roadside Moments, stories about how unexpected acts, tiny ones, can ripple into something life-changing." Claire's eyes twinkled. "It'll need a strong creative lead." He looked up at her, smiling. "Already have one in mind." Together they sat in silence for a long moment, watching the stars emerge one by one like memories finding their way back. And in that moment, surrounded by the echoes of how far they'd come, they knew they weren't chasing happy endings anymore. They were writing new beginnings. Every day, as a team, as a family, as a story worth telling.